Clara stepped out of the car, the morning sun casting a golden hue over the sprawling Thompson mansion. She adjusted her bag on her shoulder, a mix of excitement and trepidation swirling inside her. It was just another day in the life of a nanny, but there was something about the grandeur of the house that always made her feel small. The manicured lawns, the towering columns, and the sheer extravagance of the place felt like a constant reminder of the stark contrast between her modest background and the lifestyle of the family she worked for. As she entered through the ornate front door, Clara was greeted by the familiar scent of polished wood and expensive perfume. The mansion was still quiet, the only sound being the soft ticking of an ornate clock in the hallway. She set her bag down in the kitchen and took a moment to collect herself. The children, Emily and Jake, would be waking up soon, and she wanted to ensure that everything was perfect for their breakfast. Clara moved gracefully around the kitchen, her hands deftly preparing scrambled eggs, toast, and fresh fruit. She hummed softly to herself, a habit that brought her comfort. Cooking had always been a passion of hers, a skill she cherished and took pride in. As she cracked the eggs into the bowl, she thought about how much she loved seeing the children's faces light up when they enjoyed her meals. They were her little rays of sunshine in an otherwise challenging environment. "Clara?" A small voice broke her reverie. Clara turned to see Emily, a bright-eyed 7-year-old with curly hair, standing in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Good morning, sweetheart," Clara replied, beaming at her. "Did you sleep well?" Emily nodded, returning her smile. "Can I help you make pancakes today?" "I would love that. How about we surprise Jake with a special breakfast?" Clara suggested, her heart warming at the thought of the siblings working together. As they began gathering the ingredients, the atmosphere in the kitchen shifted. The door swung open, and Richard Thompson strode in, his presence instantly cooling the air. Dressed in an expensive suit, he radiated authority and confidence. But Clara knew all too well that this facade often masked a more sinister personality. "Why are you two making a mess in here?" Richard snapped, his sharp tone cutting through the cheerful moment. "You're supposed to have breakfast ready, not be playing around." Clara felt the immediate tension rise. "We're just preparing a surprise for Jake, Mr. Thompson," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Surprise? What a waste of time. Kids don't need surprises. They need discipline. You're here to do a job, not to entertain them," he barked, his eyes narrowing as he crossed his arms over his chest. Emily shrank back, her enthusiasm deflating. Clara's heart sank at the sight of the child's discomfort, and she quickly intervened. "I assure you, Mr. Thompson, the children enjoy helping, and it's important for their development." "Development? Spare me the psychology nonsense, Clara. You're just a nanny. Know your place," Richard shot back, his voice dripping with disdain. "And for heaven's sake, can we keep the kitchen clean? I don't want to walk in here and see flour everywhere." Clara swallowed hard, the sting of his words hitting her like a physical blow. She was used to Richard's condescending remarks, but they never got easier to bear. Over the years, she had learned to brush off his insults, but today, they seemed to linger in the air, making it hard to breathe. She turned away, focusing on the pancakes, her hands trembling slightly as she poured the batter onto the hot griddle. "Can we have strawberries on top, Clara?" Emily asked, her voice timid. "Of course, sweetheart," Clara replied, forcing a smile as she sliced the strawberries, her heart aching for the child who had to witness her father's cruelty. The kitchen fell silent as they worked, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Just then, Jake, the 5-year-old whirlwind, burst into the kitchen, his energy palpable. "What smells so good?" he exclaimed, his eyes wide with excitement. His innocence was a breath of fresh air, and Clara couldn't help but smile at the sight of him. "Pancakes with strawberries, Jake. We're making them just for you," Clara announced, her voice brightening with his arrival. "Yay! Can I help?" He jumped up and down, oblivious to the tension that hung in the air. "Absolutely," Clara laughed, her spirit lifting slightly. "You can be my official strawberry cutter." But Richard's voice cut through the moment like a knife. "This is ridiculous. Breakfast should be served, not a circus act. "You're wasting time, Clara," he declared, turning on his heel and storming out of the kitchen. Clara's heart sank again as she watched him go. The smiles on the children's faces faded, and she could feel their discomfort. "Ignore him, guys. He's just having a bad morning," she said, trying to lighten the mood. "But he's always like that," Emily whispered, her eyes downcast. "Why does he have to be so mean?" Clara knelt down to Emily's eye level, her heart breaking for the little girl. "Sometimes people are mean because they're unhappy inside. It's not your fault, okay? You're perfect just the way you are." Emily nodded, but Clara could see the worry etched on her small face. She wished she could shield the children from their father's harshness, but there was little she could do. They finished preparing breakfast in tense silence, the joyful atmosphere from before overshadowed by Richard's cold words. After breakfast, Clara helped the children gather their things for school. As they slipped on their backpacks, the weight of the morning lingered in the air. Clara waved goodbye as they headed out the door, her heart heavy. She loved the children dearly, but the constant strain of Richard's behavior took its toll on her spirit. Once the door closed behind them, Clara sank into a chair at the kitchen table, her head in her hands. Just then, her phone buzzed. It was Mia, her best friend and confidant. Clara quickly typed a message, pouring out her frustrations. "Another rough morning. Richard was at it again. I don't know how much longer I can take this." A few moments later, her phone buzzed again. "Meet me for coffee? You need to vent, girl. I'll be there in 15. Clara smiled faintly at the thought of Mia's encouragement. She knew she could always count on her friend to lift her spirits. After gathering herself, she decided not to dwell on Richard's words. Instead, she resolved to focus on her own worth and the love she felt for the children. As she tidied up the kitchen, Clara's thoughts drifted to her dreams. She had always wanted to pursue her passion for cooking and perhaps even open her own small cafe one day. But each day, Richard's contempt for her modest background gnawed at her self-esteem. She shook her head, trying to dispel the negativity that clung to her mind like a stubborn shadow. When Mia arrived, she swept Clara into a warm embrace. "Hey you, let's get you some caffeine and talk this out," she said, her voice cheerful and comforting. Clara found herself smiling genuinely for the first time that day. "I could really use that. I feel like I'm drowning sometimes." As they settled into a cozy corner of the cafe, Clara recounted the morning's events. "He just doesn't get it, Mia. I'm here for the kids. I love them, but he acts like I'm worthless." Mia listened intently, her brow furrowed in sympathy. "You're not worthless, Clara. You're doing an incredible job. Those kids adore you. Don't let his words define you." "I know, but it's hard when he constantly reminds me of my place." Clara sighed, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "Some days, I feel like I'm just a ghost in this house." Mia reached across the table, squeezing Clara's hand. "You need to stand up for yourself. You're stronger than you think. Remember, it's not just about surviving. It's about living. You deserve to be treated with respect." Clara looked into Mia's eyes, a flicker of determination igniting within her. "You're right. I need to find my voice again and not let him push me around. I owe it to myself and to the kids." Their conversation continued, filled with laughter and support, and for the first time that day, Clara felt a sense of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but she knew she had the strength to face whatever came next. Clara stood in the luxurious kitchen of the Thompson mansion, the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the faint scent of cleaning products. She had spent the morning making sure everything was perfect for the day ahead. The children, Emily and Jake, were off to school, and now she faced the daunting task of keeping the house immaculate, all while bracing herself for Richard Thompson's inevitable scrutiny. His icy demeanor had a way of chilling the air around her, and today, she felt a surge of determination bubbling beneath her surface. "Why can't you get it right for once?" Richard's voice boomed as he stormed into the kitchen, his tailored suit looking as sharp as his tone. Clara was taken aback, her heart racing at the sudden confrontation. She had been rehearsing in her mind how to address his behavior, but now the words eluded her. The house is a mess. I expect better from you, Clara. She swallowed hard, biting her tongue to suppress her urge to retort. I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson. I've been cleaning all morning and… Excuses. He cut her off, his eyes narrowing. You really think this is a charity? I pay you to keep this place in order, not to make half-hearted attempts. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is to come home to this? He gestured wildly around the kitchen, the extravagant tiles and polished countertops somehow not meeting his high expectations. Clara felt the familiar sting of humiliation wash over her. I'll make sure it's spotless by the time you return, she said softly, lowering her gaze. She could feel the heat creeping into her cheeks, a blend of anger and shame. She wanted to confront him, to tell him just how inappropriate his words were and how they chipped away at her self-esteem. But the fear of losing her job loomed larger. Richard scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. You'd better. I won't tolerate this sloppiness, Clara. You're lucky to even have this job. With that, he turned on his heel and stalked out, leaving Clara standing alone, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. Once the front door slammed shut, she let out a shaky breath. The kitchen felt suffocating, the silence echoing with Richard's insults. She knew she couldn't let him get to her, but his words had a way of burrowing deep into her mind. Clara took a moment to gather herself, wiping away the tears that threatened to spill over. She had been determined to confront him, to demand respect, but each time she came close, fear held her back. Later that afternoon, as she folded laundry in the children's playroom, Emily walked in, her face brightening at the sight of Clara. Hi, Clara. What are you doing? The little girl's innocent curiosity always brought a smile to Clara's face. Just tidying up, sweet pea, Clara replied, folding a colorful shirt with care. How was school today? Emily plopped down on the plush carpet, her expression turning thoughtful. It was okay, but I missed you. I don't like it when Daddy is mean to you. Clara's heart warmed at the girl's concern. Oh, honey, it's just part of my job. Sometimes adults don't realize how their words can hurt others. She tried to keep her tone light, but the truth of Richard's words still hung heavy in the air. Daddy shouldn't be mean. You're the nicest person I know, Emily exclaimed, her eyes wide with sincerity. Clara felt a swell of pride at the little girl's words, but it was quickly followed by a pang of sadness. Richard's treatment of her was a stark contrast to the kindness Emily showed. Thank you, Emily. That means a lot, Clara said, her voice softening. Just remember to always be kind to others. Okay? It's important to stand up for what's right. Emily nodded earnestly. I will. You're like my superhero, Clara. Clara chuckled lightly, pushing back the tears that threatened to spill. And you're my little hero, she replied, her heart swelling with affection. In that moment, she felt a flicker of hope, a reminder that not everyone saw her as Richard did. Their bond was a treasure, one that made the daily struggles worth enduring. As evening approached, Clara prepared dinner, her mind still swirling with thoughts of the day. She had resolved to confront Richard, but doubts crept in like shadows. What if he dismissed her? What if it cost her the job she desperately needed? Just as she was stirring the sauce, the front door swung open with a loud bang, and Clara's heart sank. Richard stumbled into the kitchen, his face flushed and eyes glassy. What's this? He slurred, eyeing the meal before her. Are you actually trying to cook? It smells terrible. Clara clenched her jaw, trying to hold back the wave of frustration. I made your favorite, sir, she said, keeping her voice steady. Favorite? I don't have a favorite from a sorry excuse like you, he shouted, his voice rising as he swayed slightly. Do you have any idea how pathetic you are? You think this is good enough for a man like me? Clara's heart raced, and she fought against the urge to snap back. Instead, she took a deep breath, reminding herself of Emily's words. I'm just trying to do my best, Mr. Thompson. Your best? This isn't a charity, Clara. You're lucky I don't throw you out of here. He slammed his fist on the counter, rattling the dishes. Every day, I come home to this nonsense, and I'm tired of it. You're just a nanny. You have no right to act like you're better than that." Clara stood frozen, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She felt like she was crumbling under the intensity of his anger. "I'm sorry if I've disappointed you," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sorry doesn't cut it. I should have fired you ages ago." Richard continued, his words like daggers piercing through her heart. She felt the tears prick at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Why do you treat me this way?" she finally asked, her voice shaking as she confronted the reality of his cruelty. Richard sneered, "Because you're nothing. Remember that. You're just a nanny, and I'm Richard Thompson. Keep your head down, and maybe you'll keep your job." With that, he stormed out of the kitchen, leaving Clara in the deafening silence. She took a moment to compose herself, but the hurt lingered, clawing at her insides. The humiliation hung in the air like a thick fog, and Clara felt her spirit begin to break. As she finished preparing dinner, she knew she had to find a way to reclaim her voice, to stand up against the torment. But how? Each day felt like a battle, and she was weary of fighting alone. In that moment of despair, she realized she needed support, a way to connect with others who understood her plight. The evening wore on, and as she cleaned up, Clara's determination slowly began to solidify. She wouldn't let Richard's harsh words define her. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: she would no longer allow herself to be a victim of his cruelty. The thought of Emily's sweet voice echoed in her mind, reminding her of the kindness she wanted to embody. Perhaps, just perhaps, it was time to take a stand. The morning sun filtered through the large windows of the Thompson mansion, casting a warm glow across the kitchen. Clara found herself seated at the small wooden table, an old letter clutched tightly in her hands. It was a letter from her mother, written years ago before she passed away. She had stumbled upon it while cleaning a dusty corner of the attic the day before, and its contents resonated deeply within her. "Clara, my sweet girl," the letter began, the familiar handwriting sparking a rush of memories. "Always remember the strength you carry inside. The world may try to belittle you, but don't let it dim your light. You are capable of so much more than you realize." As Clara read the words aloud, her heart swelled with emotion. Her mother had always been her anchor, instilling in her the values of kindness, resilience, and self-worth. The harshness of Richard Thompson's words from the previous night echoed in her mind, but she was determined to let them bounce off her like water off a duck's back. She took a deep breath, allowing the warmth of her mother's love to envelop her, igniting a fire of determination within. "I can do this," she whispered to herself, a newfound sense of purpose filling her chest. With renewed resolve, Clara stood up, smoothing the creases of her dress as she planned her day. She would attend the local support group, a gathering of domestic workers she had heard about through Mia. It was time to take a stand against the humiliation that had plagued her for so long. Later that afternoon, Clara walked into the small community center, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The room was filled with women of various ages and backgrounds, all sharing stories of their experiences in the domestic work industry. As she took a seat, she felt a wave of solidarity wash over her. Here, she was among others who understood her struggles, who had faced similar challenges and found strength in their collective voices. "Welcome, everyone," a cheerful woman at the front of the room announced, her smile radiating warmth. "Today, we're going to discuss our rights as domestic workers and how we can support each other in the face of mistreatment." Clara listened intently as stories of resilience were shared. One woman spoke of a difficult employer who constantly belittled her, while another shared how she had successfully stood up for herself and demanded better treatment. Each tale resonated deeply with Clara, and with each passing moment, her determination grew stronger. As the session progressed, Clara found herself sharing her own experiences. "I work for the Thompson family," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Mr. Thompson is, well, he's not kind. He often humiliates me in front of the children, and I've been feeling so powerless." The room fell silent for a moment, and Clara felt a wave of vulnerability wash over her. But then, one by one, the women nodded in understanding. "Oh, Clara, One of the older women said gently, "You deserve so much better. We all do. Remember, you're not alone in this." Encouraged by their support, Clara continued, "I just don't know how to stand up to him. He's so powerful and I'm just a nanny." "Power is an illusion," a young woman replied, her eyes fierce with determination. "You may think he has power over you, but by standing together and supporting each other, we can reclaim our power." The words resonated within Clara, igniting a spark of courage she hadn't felt in a long time. It was true. Richard may have wealth and status, but he did not have the right to strip her of her dignity. As the meeting came to a close, Clara felt a sense of camaraderie with the other women, a bond forged through shared struggles and a collective desire for respect. Later that evening, as Clara returned home, she was still buzzing with inspiration from the meeting. She felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She began to envision a future where she could stand tall, free from the humiliation that had plagued her for so long. However, her newfound hope was short-lived. As she entered the living room, she was met with the sight of Richard Thompson, lounging on the couch with a glass of whiskey in hand. His expression was one of arrogance mixed with disdain as he glanced up at her. "What are you so cheerful about?" he sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Did you enjoy your little gossip session with the other maids?" Clara's heart raced, but she forced herself to hold her ground. "I went to a support group," she replied, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "It was empowering." "Empowering? Please," Richard scoffed, rolling his eyes. "You're just another overdramatic nanny looking for attention. What do you expect to gain from whining like a child?" The words stung, but Clara remembered the support she had received earlier that day. She refused to let his insults cut her down. "I expect to be treated with respect," she said firmly, meeting his gaze. "I won't tolerate your humiliation any longer." Richard's expression shifted, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. For a moment, Clara thought she saw a glimpse of uncertainty in his eyes, but it quickly faded, replaced by anger. "You think you can defy me?" he spat, rising from the couch, his towering presence intimidating. "You're nothing without me. I can have you replaced in an instant." "Maybe I don't want to be here anymore," Clara shot back, her voice gaining strength. "Maybe I deserve better than this." Richard's smirk returned, but it was laced with a disdain that made Clara's blood boil. "You think your little support group can save you? You're just a nanny and I'm a millionaire. Remember that." The words hung in the air, and Clara felt a wave of anger surge through her. "You may have money, Richard, but you do not have the right to belittle me. I'm not afraid of you anymore." Richard stepped closer, his face inches from hers, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "You're playing a dangerous game, Clara. I suggest you know your place." But Clara stood her ground, her heart pounding fiercely. "And I suggest you start treating people with respect, or you'll find out just how strong I can be." As she spoke, she felt the support of the women from the group filling her with courage. This was no longer just about her. It was about every person who had ever been mistreated, every voice silenced by the weight of power and privilege. Richard's expression darkened, but Clara's resolve had solidified. She had taken the first step toward reclaiming her dignity, and there was no turning back now. She would not be just another victim. She would rise and she would fight. Clara sat in her small, cluttered room at the Thompson mansion, the faint sound of laughter and chatter from the children's playroom drifting through the door. The walls were adorned with a few pictures of her family, reminders of her humble beginnings, but the weight of her current situation hung heavily on her shoulders. She had spent countless hours caring for Emily and Jake, all while enduring the constant belittling from Richard Thompson, the family patriarch. But today would be different. Today she would take action. After a long day of work, during which Richard had again ridiculed her in front of the children, Clara had resolved to document his behavior. She had seen enough of his cruelty and was determined to gather proof. With a small digital recorder hidden in her pocket, she would secretly record their interactions whenever he was around. This was not just about her anymore. It was about all the nannies and caregivers who silently suffered at the hands of their employers. As she sat on the edge of her bed, Clara practiced what she would say if Richard confronted her about her newfound resolve. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," she whispered to herself, her voice barely above a murmur. "You don't control me." A small smile crept across her face, her heart swelling with a newfound courage. The following week, Clara began to build a network of support among other nannies in the area. They met at a cozy cafe a few blocks from the Thompson mansion, a safe haven where they could share their experiences, laugh, and, most importantly, empower one another. Clara found solace in these gatherings, where they would exchange stories and strategies for dealing with difficult employers. One evening, she hosted a small gathering at her room, inviting a few local nannies she had met. The atmosphere was light, filled with warmth and camaraderie, as they shared their stories over cups of steaming tea and homemade pastries Clara had prepared. The laughter echoed softly in the small space, a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere at the mansion. "Did you hear about Linda?" one of the nannies, Sarah, asked, her eyes wide with excitement. "She finally stood up to that awful woman she works for. Can you believe it?" The room erupted in cheers, the sound lifting Clara's spirits even higher. She had never felt so supported, so understood. The nannies shared tips on how to handle challenging situations, how to document inappropriate behavior, and how to stand their ground. Clara felt a sense of empowerment wash over her. She was no longer alone in her struggle. "Clara, you should really consider starting a blog or something," suggested Mia, her closest friend, who had joined the gathering. "You have such a way with words. Your experiences could help so many others." Clara hesitated. "I don't know if anyone would want to read about my life," she replied, her voice tinged with self-doubt. But deep down, she knew that her story was worth telling. After all, it was the stories of others that had inspired her to find her own voice. As the night wore on, Clara felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She looked around at the smiling faces of her friends, their laughter filling the room with warmth. It was a stark reminder of the strength that came from community. She was determined to keep this momentum going. However, just as they were sharing their final thoughts, the sound of a car engine revving outside interrupted their gathering. The unmistakable roar of Richard's sports car caused a collective hush to fall over the room. Clara's heart raced. She had not anticipated his return so early. The door swung open, and Richard strode in, his expression darkening when he saw the group of nannies gathered in his home. "What the hell is going on here?" he barked, his voice dripping with contempt. The atmosphere shifted, tension crackling in the air like static electricity. Clara felt a knot form in her stomach, but she stood her ground. "We were just sharing some stories and strategies. Richard, it's important for us to support one another." Her voice was steady, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her. "Support one another? In my house?" Richard scoffed, his gaze sweeping over the group with disdain. "This is a house, not a social club. You all need to leave. Now." His tone was icy, and Clara could see the anger boiling beneath the surface. "Richard, please," Clara said, trying to maintain her composure. "We're just what? Disrespecting my home? You think you can just throw a party without my permission?" Richard interrupted, his voice rising. The other nannies shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Clara for guidance. "Clara, let's go," Sarah whispered, not wanting to escalate the situation further. But Clara felt a surge of defiance welling up inside her. She wasn't going to back down this time. "No," Clara replied firmly, her voice unwavering. "We deserve a space to share our experiences. You may think you own this house, but you don't own me or my right to have friends." Richard's face turned a shade of crimson, and Clara could see the veins in his neck bulging with rage. "How dare you speak to me like that? You're nothing but a nanny," he spat, the words laced with venom. In that moment, Clara felt the collective energy of the other nannies behind her. They were her allies, her support system, and she wouldn't let Richard's anger intimidate her. "I may be a nanny, Richard, but that doesn't make me less of a person. I deserve respect, just like everyone else in this room." Richard glared at her, his eyes narrowing. You think you can just waltz in here and demand respect? You're in over your head, Clara. You need to know your place. Clara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. No, Richard. You need to understand that I have a voice, and I'm not afraid to use it. This isn't just about me. It's about all of us who have been treated like we're less than human because of our jobs. The silence that followed was thick with tension, the other nannies watching with bated breath. Clara's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood tall, refusing to back down. Richard's anger morphed into something darker, a flicker of realization crossing his face as he understood that Clara was no longer the submissive nanny he had always belittled. With a growl, Richard turned on his heel, storming out of the room, slamming the door behind him with a force that rattled the walls. The remaining nannies looked at Clara, their expressions a mix of disbelief and admiration. "Clara, that was incredible," Mia said, her eyes shining with pride. "You stood up to him. I can't believe you just did that," Sarah exclaimed, her voice barely above a whisper. "You were amazing." Clara felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. "Thank you," she replied, still trying to catch her breath. "I just couldn't let him think he could control me anymore." The room was filled with murmurs of agreement, the atmosphere gradually shifting from fear to empowerment. Clara realized that she had not only taken a step for herself, but had also inspired her friends to stand up against their own struggles. As the evening progressed, they continued to share stories, and laughter began to fill the air once more. Clara felt a sense of hope blooming within her, a belief that together they could create change. She knew that this was just the beginning, and no matter what Richard might do next, she would be ready to face it head-on. Clara stood in the opulent living room of the Thompson mansion, her heart racing as Richard Thompson towered over her, his face twisted in fury. The scent of expensive cologne mixed with the remnants of the gathering she had hosted, creating an atmosphere thick with tension. The other nannies, who had been sharing their stories of triumph and resilience just moments before, now stood behind Clara, their expressions a mixture of concern and solidarity. "Do you know how much I pay you to keep this house in order?" Richard barked, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "And yet here you are, throwing some pathetic little party while I'm not even home. You have no respect for my household, and I'll be damned if I let you ruin my reputation with your nonsense." Clara felt the weight of his words, but instead of crumbling under his intimidation as she had so many times before, a fire ignited within her. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Mr. Thompson, I'm not going to let you bully me any longer. I've been documenting your behavior, and I intend to take action." Richard's expression shifted from outrage to disbelief, his brow furrowing as he tried to process her words. "Documenting? What are you talking about?" His voice dripped with skepticism, but there was an edge of fear lurking just beneath the surface. "I have recordings of our conversations," Clara continued, her voice firm. "I've captured how you treat me, the insults you hurl, and the way you belittle not just me, but also the children. This isn't just harassment. It's emotional abuse, and I won't stand for it any longer." The other nannies exchanged glances, their resolve strengthening. They had witnessed Clara's struggles firsthand and admired her courage. One of them, a petite woman named Sophia, stepped forward. "She's right. We're not just here for a social gathering. We're here because we deserve respect, just like anyone else." Richard's face paled, the bravado that had fueled his rage beginning to evaporate. "You think you can just walk away from this? You'll regret this, Clara. I'll make your life miserable. You'll never work in this town again." "Maybe that's true," Clara replied, her voice steady despite the threat. "But I'd rather be unemployed than continue to be subjected to your humiliation. You may have power and money, but that doesn't give you the right to treat me like I'm less than human." The tension in the room was palpable. Richard, caught off guard by Clara's newfound strength, seemed to falter. He glanced around at the other nannies, who stood in solidarity behind her. They were no longer just bystanders. They were witnesses to his cruelty, and they were ready to support Clara in her fight. "Clara, you don't have to do this," one of the other nannies said gently, her voice filled with concern. Think about your job, your livelihood. I have thought about it, Clara replied, her gaze unwavering. But I've also thought about my dignity. I can't keep allowing him to treat me this way. It's not just about me anymore. It's about all of us who have been mistreated in silence for too long. Richard's anger flared again, but this time, it was laced with desperation. You'll regret this, Clara. You're nothing without me. I made you. Clara shook her head, her heart pounding with determination. No, Mr. Thompson, you didn't make me. I've made myself, and I deserve better than this. I'm ready to fight for what's right, and I won't be alone. With that, Richard stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him with enough force to rattle the chandelier hanging above. The sound echoed through the grand space, but Clara felt a wave of relief wash over her. She turned to the other nannies, who were now looking at her with admiration and support. Are you all right? Sophia asked, her voice softening as she approached Clara. I think I am, Clara admitted, her heart still racing but now filled with a sense of liberation. I didn't realize how much I needed to say that until it was out in the open. Another nanny, Lisa, stepped forward, her eyes shining with conviction. You did amazing, Clara. I've watched you take his insults and just endure them. But this was powerful. You stood up for yourself and it inspired all of us. Clara looked around at the group, feeling their collective strength enveloping her like a warm blanket. I couldn't have done it without you all here. Thank you for standing by me. I know we all have our stories, and it's time we start sharing them. Not just with each other, but with the world. That night, as Clara lay in bed, she replayed the confrontation in her mind. The way she had stood her ground, how she had felt empowered by the support of her friends, and most importantly, how she had refused to back down in the face of Richard's threats. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe things could change. Maybe she could reclaim her life and her dignity. The next morning, Clara woke with a renewed purpose. She still had a long road ahead of her, but she knew she wasn't alone. The group of nannies had agreed to meet again to discuss their next steps. They would share their experiences, their stories of mistreatment, and support one another in standing up to their employers. As she prepared breakfast for the children, Clara felt a sense of calm wash over her. The sun streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating the space with warmth. Emily and Jake entered, their sleepy faces brightening as they caught sight of her. Good morning, Clara, Emily chirped, her voice full of enthusiasm. Good morning, you two, Clara replied, her heart swelling with affection for the children. They were the reason she had endured so much, but they were also the reason she had to fight back. They deserved a better example than silence and submission. During breakfast, Clara noticed Richard's absence at the table. A small part of her felt a thrill at the thought of him being away, his anger and threats lingering in the air but no longer holding power over her. After the children left for school, Clara gathered her notes and recordings, preparing to share them with the other nannies that evening. She felt nervous about what lay ahead, but she also felt exhilarated. This was her chance to take control of her narrative, to turn the tide against the humiliation she had faced for so long. When the time came for the meeting, Clara was met with a warm welcome from her fellow nannies. They had all brought their own stories, and as they shared, Clara felt the weight of their experiences resonate with her. Each story was a thread in a larger tapestry of resilience, and together they wove a narrative of strength and solidarity. Clara realized that she was no longer just a nanny. She was part of a movement, a collective of women determined to reclaim their power and dignity. The fear that had once held her captive began to dissipate, replaced by a fierce determination to fight for justice. Not just for herself, but for all those who had suffered in silence. As night fell, Clara felt a sense of hope that had eluded her for far too long. She was ready to face whatever came next, emboldened by the support of her friends and the knowledge that she was not alone. Together, they would rise against the humiliation and create a new chapter, one filled with respect, empowerment, and unwavering strength. Clara walked into the small office of the lawyer, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with legal texts, and the faint smell of coffee lingered in the air. She could feel a sense of urgency as she approached the desk, where a middle-aged man with graying hair and round glasses sat, his expression serious yet welcoming. "Miss Clara Thompson, I presume?" he said, glancing at a file in front of him. Clara nodded, swallowing hard. "Please have a seat." As she settled into the chair across from him, Clara's mind raced. She had spent countless hours recording Richard's cruel remarks and the humiliating moments that had become her daily reality. Now, she was about to share all of that with someone who could help her. I have audio recordings," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "of Richard's comments, the way he treats me. I want to file a case against him for harassment and emotional abuse." The lawyer leaned forward, intrigued. "That's a brave step, Clara. Many people wouldn't have the courage to take action against someone like him." He gestured for her to hand over her phone. As she passed it to him, she felt a surge of vulnerability, wondering if this would open the floodgates to more pain or lead her toward liberation. Listening intently, the lawyer nodded at various points in the recordings. Clara watched as his expression shifted from curiosity to concern, and finally to something resembling admiration. "This is quite compelling evidence. It may not be easy, but we can build a strong case. You've documented his behavior well." As he explained the legal process, Clara felt hope start to blossom within her. She had always been the one to care for others, to put herself last. But now she was reclaiming her narrative. "What do I need to do next?" she asked, determination lacing her voice. "We'll need to prepare a formal complaint, and I'll advise you on how to gather more evidence," he replied. "And remember, Clara, you're not alone in this. You have the support of your friends, and there are organizations that can help you." With each word, Clara felt a weight lifting off her shoulders. She was stepping into a new chapter of her life, one where she would no longer be a silent victim. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. "I won't back down." As Clara left the lawyer's office, the cool air hit her face, invigorating her spirit. She was on a path of empowerment, ready to fight back against Richard's cruelty. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, paperwork, and building her case. Clara found herself returning to the support group, sharing her experiences and gathering strength from the other women who had faced similar situations. They rallied around her, offering advice and encouragement. Meanwhile, the media caught wind of the case. Clara's story of resilience began to circulate, and soon articles started appearing in local newspapers. Headlines like "Nanny Takes on Millionaire Abuser" and "Courage in the Face of Oppression" began to surface, and Clara felt a mixture of pride and trepidation. Richard, on the other hand, was not pleased. As his reputation began to crumble, he resorted to desperate measures. It was a sunny afternoon when Clara received a call from her lawyer. "Clara, there's been a development," he said, his tone serious. "We've uncovered some troubling information about Richard's business dealings. It seems he's been involved in illegal activities, and we believe your case could help expose him." "Illegal activities?" Clara echoed, her heart racing. She had only ever seen Richard as a tyrant in her daily life, but this revelation painted a darker picture. "What kind of activities?" "Fraud, tax evasion, possibly even embezzlement. There's a chance your recordings and testimony could be pivotal in bringing him to justice," he explained. Clara felt a mix of emotions, fear for what this could mean, but also a sense of purpose. This was bigger than just her story now. "What do I need to do?" she asked, her resolve strengthening. "Just keep gathering evidence and prepare to testify if necessary. We'll take it one step at a time." As weeks passed, Clara watched as Richard's world began to unravel. With every new article published, more people came forward with their own stories of mistreatment at the hands of the millionaire. Clara became a symbol of resilience, not just for nannies but for anyone who had faced humiliation and abuse. One evening, as Clara sat in her modest apartment, she received a call from Mia, her best friend. "Clara, did you see the news? They're saying Richard might be arrested soon." "I just heard," Clara replied, her heart racing. "I can't believe it's really happening." "I can. You're the one who stood up to him. You're a hero," Mia exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. Clara felt a mix of disbelief and triumph. "I just wanted to be treated with respect. I never thought it would lead to this." Days later, the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived. Richard was arrested, his empire crumbling as evidence of his illegal activities came to light. Clara watched the news coverage, her heart pounding as the camera zoomed in on the once mighty millionaire being led away in handcuffs. In the days that followed, Clara was interviewed by local news outlets, sharing her story of resilience and the importance of standing up against abuse. "I hope that by speaking out, I can inspire others to do the same," she said, her voice steady and strong. "No one deserves to be treated like I was." With each passing day, she felt the weight of her past lift, replaced by a sense of empowerment and community support. The other nannies she had befriended rallied around her, celebrating her bravery and the change her actions had sparked. As Clara walked through her neighborhood, she could feel the shift in the air. People recognized her now, not as the nanny who was belittled but as a woman who fought back, a woman who stood for justice. The community embraced her, and she felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. Finally free from Richard's humiliation, Clara looked toward her future with hope. She had not only reclaimed her voice but had also inspired others to find theirs. With newfound determination, she resolved to continue advocating for domestic workers everywhere, ensuring that no one would have to endure the same suffering she had. The journey had been long and filled with challenges, but Clara had emerged stronger, a beacon of resilience in a world often overshadowed by cruelty. And as she took a deep breath, ready to embrace the next chapter of her life, she knew that she would never again let anyone dim her light. If you liked the content, don't forget to leave a like, a comment, and share it with your friends. Your comment is essential for the growth of the channel. And look at this video that appears on the screen. See you soon.